Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Today is Thursday, December 28th. Hope everyone had a very nice holiday weekend and it's been a very Merry Christmas and holiday time, especially up here in the Northeast where we've got two out of the four people on the pod today. We got the other half down in, it doesn't look like sunny Florida, but I'm guessing it's nice, warm, and humid. And as always, the Ostrom Avenue podcast brought to you by Empire Hearing and Audiology. We thank them very much for their support of the show. My name is Ethan Frank, joined by Jordan Leonard. Jordan, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's not sunny right now. It's definitely raining. And if you're watching the video, you can see Hudson's on a covered patio. I don't have a covered patio, so I had to go indoors for this podcast. But definitely a lot warmer. I think it's in the mid 70s this week.
Yeah, when we were recording last, Jordan and I were both still in Syracuse. I'm now home in Connecticut. He's back in Florida. Hudson was in Colorado, in Denver. Now he's in Florida. How'd you get there?
I'm moving all over the place right now. I don't know how I keep up three different pods in three different locations. I'm in Florida right now, and it is rainy, as Jordan mentioned, but I'm getting a good taste of the wildlife. The other day, there was a bald eagle that was sitting right there, and I got to see it. It was on Christmas Day. It was a bit of a Christmas miracle. Very nice.
Bald eagles are very cool. I've seen a few in my day, none in Florida, but very cool. And if you're watching this on video, you can see who our guest is today. He is, I think you could call him one of the original founders of the Ostrom Avenue podcast. He was there from the very beginning. It's Owen Valentine. Owen, how are you?
Boys, I'm doing great. It was me and Brendan Mortensen. So I'll give him the shout out as well. He came to me with an idea. He said, let's do a podcast. And we had no name, no idea, but a couple weeks went by. We got a logo, we got an idea, we got a concept. And here it is, 5 years later, I think this is now. It's pretty crazy to see, how far the pod has come. And it's a cool thing when I scroll through and I'm looking at things, or I see on my podcast stuff that this thing is still running and still going strong every time I open that up.
Yeah, we owe a lot of thanks to you guys. I want to say, Owen, it's the majority of the graphics you'll see on our YouTube, those were created by you. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yes, yes, you would. That's all right. I like it. I had fun making them. I'm glad. I've had a few pods that I did in the past where they've changed everything. And not to throw shade, but there was one pod that I did that just like slightly tweaked everything, which really threw me through the ringer on that one because it was like all of my concepts, but they just tweaked them slightly so that they weren't mine anymore. So I'm glad that you guys have at least still embraced them and kept them in their true form instead of making the small tweaks so that you could sort of say, so long, Owen, we don't really care what you did anymore.
No tweaking to our graphics. We love them. We hope the audience enjoys them as well. So, we had Ben on last week. We had Johnny on 2 weeks ago. So with Johnny, Johnny overlapped with all of us. Ben, I don't know if Jordan and Ben ever overlapped, but Ben and I definitely overlapped a good amount. And then, Owen, as I was entering, you were graduating. So there's that minor overlap there. So, we're getting like the extended family of the podcast continues to grow. So since you graduated from Syracuse and from WAER back in 2021, what is the journey been like?
I'll tell you one thing. It's a very different journey than you've probably heard from Ben and Johnny so far. As they've explained theirs, I took a very different route than they have. The second I left WAER, the second I graduated from Syracuse, I think I walked. Well, we didn't walk; it was COVID, so I stood in the audience. The second I graduated on Friday. And then I started grad school on Monday, getting my master's in education. And so I've got a master's in education. I am currently a teacher in the Liverpool School District just outside of Syracuse. I teach broadcasting, I teach journalism. So I do the same stuff, just in a drastically different capacity. We're starting up a program to be able to do some play-by-play and calling games really soon. I know a couple of the AER guys have been down in years past to do a few basketball games. We're working on doing that all in-house now. So getting the guys going and a couple of girls as well. So being able to expand this program into, a cool little, not quite WAER, but a little bit of a starter where kids can get their foot in the door and start to experience, play-by-play and live broadcasts and continue to grow, so that, when they apply to their schools, whether it's Syracuse, whether it's whatever, they've got a lot of experience to jump right in.
That's awesome. And I mean, people in the central New York area, I'm sure, are thrilled about that. As someone who had a high school radio program for play-by-play, for sports talk radio, for stuff like that, I can't tell how invaluable that kind of experience is when you're that young, because it helps foster, those important skills, especially at that age, that I'm sure you're trying to teach. So, yeah, I mean, if you've been listening to this pod since the very beginning, you would know that Owen is a local Syracuse guy. He's been around for everything. So you have a unique perspective compared to a lot of us, having grown up in the Syracuse area. A lot has happened in Syracuse athletics over the past year or so. A new Jim Boeheim retired, and Adrian Autry is now the men's basketball coach. Dino Babers was fired, and Fran Brown is now the new football coach. I guess we can start with basketball, and just, from a holistic perspective, being in central New York and seeing all of this happen, where, especially from a basketball standpoint, your whole life growing up with Jim Boeheim, Jim Boeheim, Jim Boeheim, Jim Boeheim. What has that been like?
It's a weird shift. It definitely was something that needed to happen, but it was sort of like that bittersweet ending. Like it hit the point where he needed to go, but at the same time, like, this is a guy that took a program from nothingness, brought it to national prominence, and they were in the blue blood conversation for a while. Sometimes they're included now, sometimes they're not. It depends, what they need the graphic for, whether they need Syracuse to be involved. But, I sort of said, as painful as it could become, Boeheim earned himself the longest leash in all of the universe. So if he needed to stay for 10 more years, it could have sucked. It could have been really brutal. But in my mind, it was his job until it hit him that he needed to go, even if it hit the entire fan base before him. And I'm glad that, even if it was that weirdness, that funky ending that made no sense, but it was the only true way that Jim Boeheim could go out, was utter confusion and chaos. And what is going on? Does he have a job? Does he not? Did he want the job? Did he get fired? Did he step down? We don't know. But they make the transition. I think Adrian Autry was the easy choice, in that if there's going to be a smooth transition, he was going to be the guy to do it, right? A guy that knew the program, that knew the personnel, the people already involved. He was the option for this to be really, really efficient and effective if it worked. So far, I like what I've seen. I mean, I like that people want to come to Syracuse now, and there's some prominence in that. And it seems like he, and, bringing in, I think his greatest addition so far is Brendan Strawn, who's been incredible with the recruiting ties that he presents with his EYBL connections, and just the area that he has really just seen so much success immediately, impact-wise. It's weird that Jim's gone. Jim will never truly be gone. He's got a way to continue lingering. But it was a transition that needed to happen. And even if this season, year one with Adrian Autry, isn't like, a Final Four run, which, let's be honest, that's not what we're looking at. I think what we've seen off the court immediately, I already have chalked this season up successful because of that new sort of off the court recruiting spark that you've seen, with people wanting to come here a little bit more than in sort of the final 3 or 4 years of Boeheim.
And that's the sentiment, I think, with a lot of us, and especially that we've talked about here on the pod, is that it's very positive, and everything we've seen so far is like, oh, this is kind of, it's about building something sustainable at this point, and making sure that, the highs that Jim Boeheim accomplished, you can also set yourself up to be able to get back to that place at one point. So from what you've seen, and we can bring everyone else in, but starting with you, Owen, what we've seen from this team on the court through 12 games, what have been your biggest takeaways from Adrian Autry's squad?
They're fast and they're athletic, which is, I mean, that was one of my biggest complaints closing things out in terms of my time at AER. And then as I transitioned out of there, it was slow basketball. It was really, like, not fun to watch. It was I'm trying to like envision cool offensive plays from the time that I'm thinking of right now, and they don't really exist outside of like a Judah Mintz poster in transition, which happened. That was awesome. But like, what else were they doing offensively? And that even extends farther back, when the Boeheims were playing and when Joe Girard was doing what Joe Girard did. It was weird. It was slow. It was just stagnant is the big thing. And I've seen it pick up a lot more. And that comes through, having two guards and, forwards as well that can really get out and move. And you've seen that with a little more activeness defensively. I look at the KenPom rankings, and the defensive ranking is pretty solid. The offensive could still probably improve, and I think that's one of the biggest things that they could do. But where their offense succeeds is off of the defense, and I'm not breaking any news with that statement. But like their activeness in passing lanes and the speed that they present has really created their best opportunities. My biggest, I guess, gripe so far has been when they're not out and running, when they can't get their steals and they have to run a set half court offense. It has extended moments that are eerily similar to the Boeheim stuff that we hated, and the Boeheim stuff that was one of the biggest reasons that this team couldn't succeed and couldn't, find and break through that barrier in the past. And when they're in the half court sets, it's a little bit better, but it does remind me a little too much of what we really, really despised as Boeheim was closing out his career.
That's what concerns me the most, I think, going into conference play is, you mentioned the fast break offense, and that's probably the best offense that Syracuse can run when they're out and running because of the way they have their team, where you play Justin Taylor at the 4 and Chris Bell at the 3, especially in the starting lineup. You can run with the best of them. Nobody's going to be able to keep up with the speed. But when you settle down into that half court offense, one, it looks like most times than not, there's not necessarily a set designed play that they are running, which is good and bad. I mean, you don't want to constrict your guys to, set plays every single time in the half court, but usually some organization would be good from time to time, because usually when you draw up a set play, it's drawn up to work. But there's not as much direction in the half court offense. And what scares me the most going into conference play is that these defenses, the goal is just going to be keep Syracuse out of the fast break. Like whatever you do, set up the half court defense and make them go against your half court defense, because that's where they're going to struggle the most. If Syracuse ran their entire offense just in the fast break and they really had very limited half court offense sets, their KenPom offensive ranking would be strides higher than it is right now. So I'll be interested to see how they adjust to that if teams literally try to take away any fast break offense, because if they can't execute in the half court offense against ACC teams, is going to be a long conference play if they don't make the adjustments quickly.
Both of you guys kind of hit the nail on the head for me as well. It's that kind of mixture between, okay, they're really fun when they get out in transition. And this is a fun, energetic, exciting team. Judah's fun. Quadir is fun. JJ Starling, when he wants to be, can be fun. But when they get into that half court, it wears you down. It gets frustrating. It really does, because you're just saying, can we have a plan? Is there a plan when we get to this half court? Or is Judah just going to dribble out half of the shot clock, take it to the hoop, throw up a floater? It's going to miss. And then all of a sudden we wasted that possession. Nobody else touched the ball that entire time. We had no plan. Or is it going to be 5 dribble handoffs at the top, and then you're still stuck right there and half the shot clock is gone? You have no plan. That's the thing that, again, at the end of the Jim Boeheim era, you just wish there was more of a plan when they were out there in those half-court sets. And you don't feel confident when the game starts to grind down against a team like Virginia, where they're not going to give you a lot of fast break opportunities and the game grinds down a little bit to a halt. How can you break through? And they don't really have that full plan right now of how they're going to break through. So seeing that would be, a little better. But like you said, Owen, this is a win as a season right now because of what the offense looks like in transition. They're a fun team. They're still a young team too. Pretty much all of the production is coming from sophomores. So what I see so far has been a complete win, but Jordan's right. Come ACC play time, this team's a wild card. They could make this even more of a win, but with a string of ACC losses where they're not playing well in half-court sets or the defense takes a step back, then we could see a massive, massive shakeup in terms of what we consider to be a win.
Yeah, I agree with what everything you guys said. And I think, the interesting part about this is Judah Mintz is terrific in transition. Oh, and you talked about, those poster dunks. He had, that one against Illinois last year, the one against LSU this year. And those dunks are awesome. And he's terrific if he gets out in transition. But he is not always looking to get the ball out in transition. He'll go if somebody grabs the rebound and he gets an outlet pass at half court. But compared to JJ Starling or Quader Copeland, who would be the other two guys bringing the ball up the court, those two guys, if they get the rebound, they're the ones pushing in transition. If Judah, gets the ball in the backcourt, he's walking the ball up the court. And I think, that's kind of, this different balance is okay. We have this style of play that works really well for a lot of the team. However, our best player works really well in this other style. And I think that is a really interesting challenge that this team is going to have moving forward. Oh, and something for you. We talked about it with Ben last week is talking about Benny Williams because we brought up how you guys had the chance to interview him after he committed and we talked about that and just how what you've seen because Ben was a senior for his freshman season. You were, I guess, so you're 4 years older than you're the same college class as he was, high school class, but you still, watch the team. Having spoken to him before, he came to Syracuse and now he's been in the program. This is his third season. What has it been like from that moment to now?
Well, I mean, I'll give him this. He was the first sort of interview we did. I mean, in terms of bringing a player on, like we had spoken with some alums and some things like that. But Benny was, if I remember the timeline correctly, like the first, okay, here's an actual episode. Like we were talking some things, but Benny was like, okay, like this, people are going to click on this. And it was a really cool thing to have. And I always remember, I think somewhere in the interview, or maybe it was before we recorded, we were like, hey man, like thanks so much for coming on. Like we know, this isn't by any means the biggest show you could have done at this point in time. I think we were probably maybe only 5 or 10 episodes into like the YouTube space at all. And he was like, don't thank me. My dad made me do it. And we were just losing it laughing before we jumped on. So he did that. It was cool to have him on, but it's been weird. Like, talk about a guy that had such high expectations. And this is another thing where like, we talk about this unfortunate narrative of Jim Boeheim to close out his career. Like Benny Williams was the case in point. Like Boeheim also, and you can say what you want. I defend Boeheim more than most people do. Maybe it's the Central New Yorker in me, maybe it's whatever it is. But he had a couple of bad breaks recruiting wise. And Benny Williams was one of them. Like landed a top 50 guy that just didn't pan out. And maybe not top 50, but like I look back to the sort of 5 years leading into that as well. And, Bryson Goodine, for example, and some other names in that mix were like Matthew Moyer in the mix as well, to go a little bit younger. There's a chance you don't even know who he is based on what he did/didn't do at Syracuse. And then he went to Vanderbilt, whatever. But these are like guys that were supposed to be huge recruits that just weren't when they got here. And you think like if a couple of those panned out a little better, maybe the narrative of Boeheim's career closing isn't as tragic as it actively is. But it has been really weird watching Benny struggle, and then all of a sudden it clicks, and then he's back into the struggle, and then it clicks, and then he's back into the struggle, and then I don't know the details of this year. I heard a rumor that I want to think is true because it's one heck of a story, and I'll tell you guys after. But there's no confirmation to it. But I hope that's true because that would be awesome. I don't know what's going on. I have some ideas. Some of those ideas are better sourced than others. It's weird right now. And I do say this about Benny, and I will always say this, is I really do respect and appreciate him trying to grind it out and make it work here. In today's era of basketball and college athletics as a whole, I would say 99% of players are gone into the portal probably 2 times already, if this is what has happened. And I do really respect him for trying to do it in one spot and trying to power through and grow. But it lacks that consistency. And I think, that is what you need from him right now, is just some consistency. And it's been funky to watch because of just the ups and downs of it, and trying to piece it all together.
Yeah, before you jump in, Jordan, I want to hit on. I'm with you on the Boeheim point and like the recruit. I just went back through 24/7 a little bit. Like Matthew Moyer was a top 80 recruit. I mean, how about Jalen Carey?
He's terrible, Jalen Carey.
Jalen Carey, and it's like, Boeheim got a lot of flack. We don't need to turn this into a defending Boeheim podcast, but like Boeheim got a lot of flack for a lot of guys leaving. Like, I mean, Quincy leaving and just never, like, his sophomore season at Syracuse is easily the best season of college basketball he's played. And then he played 2 years at Oregon, and that didn't go well. And now he's at Illinois, and he's still in college, his 5th season of college basketball. Like you talked about Bryson Goodine, never panned out. And like how about a Torian Thompson too, over this past, half dozen year stretch, was a top 100 4-star recruit as well.
Can I go crazy? Can we say this guy Dior Johnson that was a top 10 recruit when Syracuse signed him, and then we don't need to talk about what happened after that?
I could tell. I remember exactly where I was when Dior Johnson committed, and I was losing my mind. That's how big of a deal that was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even though he transferred, he's not doing too much at Seton Hall.
Yeah. I mean, like they're just for some big names that decommitted and tried some things, and whatever it even was, or transferred. And I remember like last year, I would do episodes talking about like, here's the whatever it is, 8 guys that transferred from Syracuse, and there's not a soul that's doing better elsewhere. So like, there's this huge conversation of, they can't keep a guy.
Right.
Quincy,
like Jesse,
in my mind,
like Jesse's like the only argument you could make, but he also, like, that's because he developed over 4 seasons at Syracuse and like was ready to go play professional basketball.
And the number they gave with Jesse was $800K. I'm really content with the market that Syracuse is in and the pool of money that they have NIL wise. I'm okay with $800K not going for 1 year of Jesse Edwards. I heard they offered 4.
True, but if you consider what this team would be with Jesse Edwards, you also start to feel, because the hole is at the center spot, it would change the play style a little.
It's a lot of ifs, but a lot of ifs, ands, and buts. When you recruit Naheem McLeod, you think that he can replace at least some of what Jesse Edwards could do.
Let's not forget, Naheem outplayed Jesse when Florida State played Syracuse last year. Let's not keep that out of the back pocket.
He dropped 17 points, and he looked good. The one
when Naheem is good. When Naheem is good, when he can just stand in the dunker spot behind his zone all game.
So why not? Well, okay, behind his zone. There's the comment right
more
there.
Teams with a zone. Find the only teams left playing a 2-3 zone.
I don't think anyone dominate in practice.
I don't
when they
think
play zone.
Knows.
He must dominate in practice when they play zone.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god. Well, so
just not on the court.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the problems, I think, in terms of, we were talking about the offense a little bit in terms of the half court, is we talk about how athletic they are and how they're awesome when they play fast, but when they slow it down. I talked about how they have the guys to play fast in terms of when you play Justin Taylor at the 4, especially when you slow it down. That's when you get into one-on-one matchups where you kind of realize that the matchups necessarily aren't there in the half court, where a Naheem doesn't really have a post-up move. Like, you can't feed the post, Naheem back a guy down and do a jump hook. You can't have, well, Justin Taylor, I guess, could do that, but at the 4, he's going against a guy probably 20, 30 pounds bigger than him. So you look at the certain matchups, especially against bigger teams when you get to ACC play, it's like the matchups in the half court aren't there. That's why a lot of the offense is like Judah Mintz getting to the basket and either dumping it down or kicking out to a 3. And then even if you look at the shooting, like Chris Bell's the main shooter. JJ Starling has just started to shoot the ball a little bit better. Justin Taylor hasn't been great shooting. So if you look at it in the half court, some of the lineups that they run aren't as complementary as others. And I know Ethan's going to love this. In terms of like getting out on the fast break, the guy that does it the best is Quiddier. And I think JJ Starling should have that mindset. Judah Mintz is Judah Mintz. Like, if he wants to slow it down and take a guy one-on-one, you're not going to necessarily turn that down. but everybody else should be looking to run, because when you catch those defenses off guard, especially because sometimes you lack the matchups in a half court offense, the team should be looking to run it every single second, even if it's a made basket. Get out and run, even if they are there, even if it's a 5-on-5. If you catch them off guard enough, it's a lot easier to run your offense.
Let me
Exactly.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
Hudson. Let me chime quick, and then I swear this will be efficient.
Yeah.
But the funny thing with Naheem for me, and you're so right, he can't do anything. I like the guy a lot. He came on my old show, which I don't whatever. I saw him out and a couple times in Syracuse over the summer. Comes up to me like nicest dude ever. Really cool dude. But like, I mean, you're 7'4", you can't even win the tip off. But the funniest thing to me is like, I believe, and correct me, and maybe I'll go back and check this after we finish recording. I'm pretty sure like the first basket of the season for Syracuse was like a semi-decent McLeod post move, which is the funniest thing because it just hasn't existed
Yeah,
since then.
that's the thing is like, as someone who watched a lot of what was like the patented thing Syracuse would do every offensive possession under Jim Boeheim the last 15 years, get the big man a touch like on the block. I think last year, I
Yes.
think first Jesse got the first ball at first possession every single time. Like I could go back however many
I can
centers you want.
confirm the first basket against New Hampshire in the opener, 10 seconds into the game, was a good layup by Naheem McLeod in the
Yeah.
paint.
Yeah,
What's
I mean,
happened?
we can go back to however many centers you want. Christmas, Coleman, Onawaku, like whoever you want to say, they're always trying to get the center of the ball.
And they still try. They still try. No, I took a completely different thing out of what Jordan said too, because I was thinking about the big man, but it goes all the way back to what Ethan was talking about with Judah, where Judah isn't looking to get out and run, and he's looking to have it get to the half court so he can drive to the hoop. I think it's Judah is obviously your best player, and it becomes a little bit of a back and forth of, okay, do we need to play around Judah because he's our best player, or do we need to, play our play style because that's what's going to win games? You have to go with the section that's going to have you win games. So Judah, even though he's an NBA prospect and this is what he does, that's what his strengths are. He also, at the same time, if they're going to win anything this season, if Syracuse can win anything this season, they're going to have Judah get out in transition and look to run the floor, because he's not slow. He's fast. He's quite fast. And he shows that in every half court set when he blows by people. But at the same time, if he's not giving that, I'm not going to say effort, because it's just not his style. It's not an effort thing. It's a style thing. But if he's not conforming to that style, it's going to be a lot tougher to win games. If you can consistently catch teams off in transition, that's what you're going to have to do, because you don't have that half court set offense. But Judah has to be the one to adapt. The team can't just adapt to Judah.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. Jordan, you mentioned Quadir, so let's talk about him. Owen, I see that gets you excited. I mean, I'm happy to have as many people join the bandwagon as they want. I've been on this for quite a long time. I've gone back into the archives. I found some takes from like early, like January, February last year, talking about, how in I was on Quadir when he was barely even playing. And, now, we're lucky enough that this is, the fruit has bore and this has come to fruition. We got into a pretty heated debate on the double overtime after the Oregon game, because I told Jordan that I thought Quadir Copeland was not the best, but the most important player on the team because of everything he does that contributes to winning, whether it's playing in transition, his defensive intensity and energy, and then just playmaking and being able to get his teammates involved. Even more important, Judah Mintz and his scoring are very important. If you don't have Judah, then that is an issue. But I think because what Quadir does contributes so heavily to winning basketball games as a team, that to me, he is the most valuable and most important player on the team, despite the fact that he does not start. This question was posed to Alan Griffin, assistant coach, and he had to think about it and before eventually siding with Judah, but he said Quadir was a close second. So I wanted to hear your take on the matter.
I like him a lot. And I want to say this before I even dive in. I am wrong about Copeland. And I was wrong, because when I was talking roster all through the summer, when I was talking, okay, Syracuse just added another guy who's probably going to be right when they bring in Starling. That was the conversation. When they are starting to transition, what the heck position is Justin Taylor going to play? My worry the entire offseason was that Copeland gets lost in the minutes, and the minutes don't exist for him. And Copeland would have been a guy that, like we just talked about transfers that didn't succeed. Copeland is a guy that I would be really worried that he would pop off the second he left Syracuse. I am so incredibly happy that the minutes exist. And what he's done with the minutes is outstanding. I'm just like trying to do some mental math here, like, extrapolate his production in the minutes that Starling gets. Like if we were to say maybe expand to next year, if Judah departs, Starling becomes the 1 and Copeland maybe plays the 2 and like sort of extrapolate to 30, 35 minutes. And the production's outstanding. Like what he does in 19 minutes right now to give him, I don't know math that great, but bump it up by almost 100%, 75% increase. Like he's putting up better numbers than Starling is in 35 minutes, if that expands perfectly, which I know it doesn't, but the spark he brings is irreplaceable. And it is really something with him. And I think his greatest attribute, and sort of what you were saying, Ethan, is like, this is the guy that brings so much and elevates the team. And I go to like, a football comparison to last year. I think of him as sort of, and this is not even an even comparison because he's coming off the bench and doing things like that. But like, I think of Michael Jones, who I just feel like wasn't the most incredible player on the football field, but just elevated guys and sparked things and brought some energy and brought some creativity and things like that. And I see that out of Copeland. And I think when he comes into the game, even last year, like you were saying, when it was even more rare and sparse and you weren't seeing it all too often, you saw the spark. Even on his off days, there was something new that came when he hit the court. Judah is Judah, which I think actually hurts him in the argument more than it helps him, because we do know who Judah is and we know what Judah can do. I don't hate your take that Quadir is that guy because of the spark. I don't know if I'm going to come out and say it, but I don't know who the argument is outside of Judah. But I do think that Judah being who he is and the style of play, and just sometimes I love Judah Mintz. He gets into his, there's 8 minutes left in the game and I only have 10 points. I should probably take 10 more shots. Right? Like that one always brings it back to me. So screw it. I'm siding with you. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
It was a long route to saying yes.
And that means, and your support means the world. I will say a couple of things. I think, basketball specifically, because, there are so few players on a roster. And, especially at Syracuse, where Jim Boeheim's rotations were 7 players maximum at times, that, Quadir Copeland, where everyone coming into the season said, this guy has worked so hard. He is the best player in practice. And not only has that transitioned into games, but basketball, more than really any other sport, is kind of about making the most of your opportunity. And Benny was ahead of him last year, and then Benny missed a few games and didn't have his act together, and Quadir took his minutes, and Chance Westry got injured, and that probably also contributes to where some of Quadir's minutes are coming from. And if he didn't play well, then it's possible that Chance Westry would come back and take his minutes. I currently see no world in which that happens at the moment. I mean, he's probably taken some of Kyle Cuff's minutes, who's the 9th man in this rotation right now, averaging only 12 minutes a game, even though he's played in all 12 games this season. But it's about taking advantage of your opportunity. Another Copeland anecdote that I have is I was at the Oregon game in Sioux Falls, and it was that place was very cool, but like you couldn't go in the locker room to talk to the players after the game. They came out and they're right in the tunnel, which was like right on the court, like a high school gym. Like the locker room walks right out onto the court. So there were probably, I don't know, 100 Syracuse fans waiting outside the tunnel or so, waiting to take pictures with a bunch of players. I will say, watching 10 and 12-year-olds take pictures with 7'4" Naheem McLeod was quite funny, because they were about up to his waist. but we were talking to either JJ or Judah, and Quadir walked out of the locker room, and every single fan, just everyone erupted, like legitimately, like erupted, like he was like a conquering hero. That's how much, like, not only is he a fan favorite, but like, and JJ just turns around, he's like, "That's Quadir for you," and like that's the effect this guy has on fans. He has on his teammates. And that's, I think, also what the take stems from a little bit.
This is going to sound like a dying effort here, but I have to keep throwing up my shots. Owen, Ethan this whole time has been Quadir. And I didn't fully doubt him, but I wasn't fully on the wave at the same time. I have been going down with the ship on the Malik Brown is the most important player on this team. And now let me get a 60-second block here, Jordan.
Geez.
I know you're shaking your head, okay?
Hit
but
it.
I have to present other evidence here. What he adds to the team, and I'm not saying at this point that he's more important than Quadir, because the stretch that Quadir had has kind of put me out to pasture on this argument. However, what he provides is a big man rebounding wise. He's the best rebounder that they can put out there on the floor. Him and Justin Taylor are the best rebounders, even though they're 7'4" Naheem McLeod. The energy that he brings in terms of getting steals, it's like what Quadir does, but you have other guys at that guard position who can do that. He has that kind of not full length where he's going to be able to compete at the center spot come ACC time, but he has that underrated length, and he's a little bit on the skinnier side, but he still makes up for it, grabbing offensive boards and tip outs and things like that. I'm not going to say he's the most important player, and he's not the energy guy. I don't think I've ever seen him smile, but I still want to make sure he's not lost in the shuffle here in terms of most important players on this team, because what he does bring is very valuable. And I feel like he continues to go under the radar a lot, even when Quadir has these big games or Quadir doesn't have these big games. We don't always talk about Malik Brown because he's been so consistent for so long. We kind of don't give him the credit he deserves. I'm just putting that out there in the ether.
You know, Hudson, my dear friend of mine by the name of Matthew Bonaparte once took probably 2 months worth of crap from Syracuse listeners for saying last year that Malik Brown should be in the starting five before the season. And I have to tip my cap, because even I thought it was dumb. And he stood by it, and he took a lot of shots for it. And I'll tell you what, he wasn't wrong when it came down to it. And I need to give him the shout out. So Bones, good for you, buddy. That's a heck of a take.
I don't know if he should have started over Jesse Edwards last year, but
I
was
was
on
at the 4.
I was
He
at the
said over
4.
Benny.
Okay, it was over Ben. Okay, you can definitely make the argument for that.
That was before we knew he was the best 5 on the team, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big Malik Brown guy. I've been rooting for him since last year because of the energy that he showed. Last year, Hudson, when Quadir really didn't play at all, Malik Brown was the energy guy off the bench. Now they're kind of both the energy guy. Quadir smiles a lot more than Malik, so that's where he kind of brings the happiness to it. One thing that you mentioned, I can't remember if it was Owen or Ethan, and how Judah Mintz kind of like takes away the impact of Quadir because of what he does. I think also when they're on the floor together, it limits Quadir's impact because Judah's a ball dominant guard. And for Quadir to do what Quadir does, he's not going to score points. Like, he's going to score points. He's not going to score a lot of points. His impact is when he has the ball and can dish and can drive and that stuff and bring the ball up. So I think honestly, he probably will work better as much as, Judah Mintz needs to be on the floor. If you put Quadir in, especially when Judah Mintz is off the floor, I think that's where you see his most impact. And also something, I think Quadir, we talk about who's the most important. And Ethan, you can make the argument for Quadir. I still think if you take Judah Mintz's 20 points away from this team, they're absolutely screwed. But Quadir is the most important for the other things other than scoring. When he's on the floor, he guards the best offensive player. Like, that takes pressure off of Judah and JJ. He impacts everyone else on the floor just as much as Judah does, but in different ways that don't show up and aren't as, let's call it, sexy as maybe Judah Mintz does.
Yeah. I think, this is a very fun conversation, and we could go for a while here. I think I'm happy this basketball season, Owen, because what I've tried to get out of the three of us have gotten in some pretty heated arguments. Johnny. Johnny doesn't really. Johnny and I never really got into it over things. Johnny's always, Mister. Not even agree with you, but he's a very, mild tempered guy. He's not getting worked up about a lot of stuff. I would say Ben is a little similar in that way. But Ben has his moments, but the three of us have been getting into it. I think what I've tried to create, what we've tried to create here this season is building takes about this team. So Quadir has been my overarching. This is my island. Quadir is my guy, and if you want to hop on, you can. You just have to report to me. I've come up with this secondary take, and I'm interested.
boy.
And they hate it. They hate it.
Oh God.
But I know, it's good, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I was lucky enough to be at the Maui Invitational, and being that close, I watched dissected warm-ups. Like, we were right on the floor, and I don't know if it was before Tennessee or Gonzaga, but I was sitting right next to Donna DeToto, Syracuse.com, and I was watching Malik Brown, and I was like, Donna, can Malik shoot? Like this, he's got a good, like, his form is good. He's shooting during, like, his shot during warmups looks good. Why doesn't he shoot? And she was like, he used to shoot threes all the time in high school, but he just hasn't here. So, back, I guess it was, mid to late November. I was like, I think Malik is going to become a stretch five by the end of the year. And then he hits this three against Niagara. He took one, I want to say, at the end of the game against Tennessee. In very low stakes. I'm like, oh, that looked good. And then he hits this pick and pop against Niagara. And Adrian Autry says after the game he could potentially be hitting one or two a game by the end of the year. I mean, I don't know. It's different, like, getting to watch him in warmups and see him just put up shot after shot. It's not perfect like a Chris Bell or a Justin Taylor, form or spin by any means. But if Malik, and the argument I've been making to these two is that even if he's only a 30 or 32% shooter, at not a very high volume, just the threat of him being able to step out and stand on the perimeter and bring the other team's big man out of the paint opens up the lane so much, because Syracuse is, their three leading ball handlers, and Mintz, Starling, and Copeland want to get into the paint, that can help this offense, which is not as good as the defense, by the numbers that we've talked about, can be really, really effective.
Okay, here's a few things. It's a loaded take, Ethan. Loaded. I'm going to throw a tangent out here. I can hit threes in warmups. Does that mean I can do it in ACC play? No. I like your point that it adds an element, and if he shows that he would shoot, maybe it changes the defense a little bit. But I've always gone back and forth on how much stake I should put into watching somebody warm up, because at this level of basketball, the warm-ups look pretty good, top to bottom. And so I'm always curious, like, when I would go and report on games. And,
like Chris Bell does not miss a shot 1-on-0 in warmups, which he shouldn't for how good of a shooter he is.
Right? Like it's I don't know how much to put in. I will say I was at the Niagara game. It was cool to see him make a three. That was fun. Jesse Edwards made his three. His 3-point shooting percentage was tremendous.
That was the end of a shot clock. That was a heave.
Shooting, though.
That was different. That was a heave at the end of the shot clock. He had to shoot it.
I mean,
don't know.
The form didn't look bad on that shot, though. The form did not look bad. He stepped in.
Okay. Well, so it's one thing. It's one thing for the form not to look bad. Let's be real.
Okay.
Like,
in the last week, I worked 18 high school basketball games. Okay, there are some guys with great form. Do I want them shooting for Syracuse basketball? No.
Uh-huh.
Well, so
also in high school could hit a jump shot. I'm not putting him out there and he's the same size as Malik Brown. I'm not putting him out there to shoot against
Ethan.
guys.
Ethan can
Kyle
shoot from
is studying
three.
math right now. That's not his game.
Ethan can shoot from three in the Barnes Center gym. I'm not putting him out there on Jim Boeheim court against Pitt coming up.
That's true. What about
it's
against the DO on Jim
no,
Boeheim?
okay, against the DO, sure, yeah, sure. Got to also put some context into this. One, I have my sources that from AKA Ben Spector, that it wasn't as good as Ethan is letting on in terms of the warm-ups, but that's neither here nor there. Ethan was also pushing for Quadir to keep shooting threes because eventually they'll go in. Meanwhile, the guy is 0 for 9 from three-point land. So it's like he just wants them to keep shooting because he thinks if they nail one, that the defense will start honoring the three-point line against the Quadir or Malik, which I think is a little bit flawed. But I mean, if he's one of two, it's just the situation. Like against Niagara, of course, you don't mind him taking a three because it's against Niagara. If you're coming down the stretch against Pitt and he gets the ball open from three-point land because nobody's guarding him out there, and it's a 2-point game, you're not going to have him shoot the three. Like that. That's where I come in.
I think you guys would be, would you disagree that in like the middle, let's say middle 20 minutes of the game, honestly, middle 30, honestly, actually, okay.
There's only 40 minutes in the game.
The middle 38 minutes.
Okay. The first
outside of the last 30 seconds.
Let's say
instead of the post touch to begin the game, Malik Brown shoots a three.
In the first 30 minutes of the game. Let's say this. In the first 30 minutes of the game, if Malik Brown or Quadir Copeland has an open spot up three, you would be upset with them taking it.
I'd rather Malik Brown take it than Quadir. I'd rather Malik Brown take it than Quadir.
That's not my question. That's not my question. Said you would be upset if they took an open spot up three in the first 30 minutes of the game.
Quadir,
no, I would not be upset.
Okay.
I'm saying
Quadir, yes. You're saying
if Quadir is open, he's got space around him. Drive.
Put the ball on the floor. That's a
Put
good
the ball
take.
on the floor. Drive. If he has enough space around him where he can shoot a three, he has enough space around him where he can start to drive to the paint.
I feel like it would depend on the situation. Like it depends on where the shot clock's at, where everyone else is on the floor, who's on the floor with them.
I didn't put that much thought into this hypothetical.
I know. I'm not saying you did, but that's what would go through my mind. It would depend on who's on the floor. Because like if a certain lineup is on the floor, if the shot clock's at like 7, like if it's at 22, no, do not take that three. Try to get a better shot. So it really just depends on the situation at the time. Would I be absurdly upset saying, Malik Brown, you should go to the bench because you just attempted a three? No, but it really determined, like, if it's a good shot would determine the situation.
My AAU basketball coach, I was probably in 9th grade, he once called me over in a timeout and he said, Owen, I thought I told you no threes in the second half. So maybe that's what Autry has to put in for Malik Brown here, and just say, maybe you try one early on. If all of the 100 stipulations that Jordan just laid out are making sense, but maybe we limit this for a little bit, because to your point of maybe they'll defend him heavily. I gamble. I won't lie. If he's shooting 25%,
you're of age in a legal state. There's no
nothing
shame.
wrong with it.
No shame. Yeah.
If you're shooting 25% from three, am I gonna bring my big man out to open up the lane to Judah Mintz and JJ Starling and Quadir Copeland and whoever else wants to put the ball on the floor? Am I gonna let you take that 25% three, or am I gonna open myself up to the 50% in terms of the layup, or maybe even higher than 50%? In terms of a lesser contested layup in the paint?
Yeah.
Do I want to sacrifice that to really get up in Malik's face on the 3-point line?
No,
well, and that's where
it's interesting.
That's where I think the defensive point, he has to take more than just one. Like what Owen said, they'll give him that first one most definitely. They'll give him the first. If he makes the first one, that's when you start to think about what you want to do. But then he has to take more than one per game, and if he's not doing that, then it's kind of just pointless at that point.
Yeah, and now he has to take more than one a game in ACC play. Again, it goes back to what Jordan said. Yeah, you can take those against Niagara. The second you start to get into ACC play, I want someone who's going to make those threes consistently. And this argument has me a little torn because I keep having this pro Malik Brown agenda, but I say, hey, no shooting threes. I understand. I understand that. But at the same time, I can't see him start to shoot threes in ACC play. If he hits 2 more in a row, I think I texted this into the group chat after Ethan was like, see what happened? See what happened? Like the show after Malik Brown hits a 3. I understand that. If he hits 2 more in a row, I'll say, yeah, okay, that's fine. But as of right now, no more threes. Still no more threes. I don't care. I'm taking the ball away from him. No more threes until he hits 2
and
more.
I can't wait to shove it in
me.
your face when he makes a couple more.
Okay,
throughout
do that.
ACC
Do
play.
that.
All right,
Ethan,
I think,
you
yes,
don't, hold on.
yes.
You don't get to throw that last jab there. You just looked so sad for the last 5 minutes of us discussing this, and now you're going to throw one last final jab.
I mean, I have to get the last word in. I can't just sit here and take all this and not get the last word in. I think we've kind of I think we've gotten over a lot of basketball stuff here. We're approaching an hour of your time. Oh, and any final basketball thoughts? I do want to ask you about football, but if you have any final basketball thoughts as we
My
head into
final
ACC play.
basketball thoughts are: there's one hell of a recruiting class coming in. I'm excited for it. I like the pull that this coaching staff has right now. And, maybe this is something that most Syracuse fans don't like to hear, but I personally don't care what happens this basketball season. If it's great, great. If it sucks, oh well. I have so little stake in what happens this year, as long as the recruiting and the pull to Central New York that we saw immediately, right? I mean, how many days after Autry took over did Starling commit?
I think 2,
Yeah,
it was less
right.
than a
We
week.
saw
Yeah.
the immediate impact. As long as that continues this offseason, I have so much more care in next year because of what I know is coming in. Are you going to lose Judah? Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
I think my only counter argument
well.
to that is that I would like to see Judemans play in the NCAA tournament, and
Correct.
that is
Yeah.
something I care about, that, because this is probably his last season of college basketball, and that I think that would be my only counterpoint. Is I agree with you. This year is about setting the foundation and build and starting the climb back to becoming. I don't know if there'll ever be a full on blue blood, but at least being in the second or third tier of blue bloods. So I kind of agree with you, but it would be a huge accelerator if you can be in the tournament this year, especially with a player like Judah, where if he is on, you could beat anyone. Speaking of,
I want them in the tournament.
Yeah,
I don't need that. I want them to win. I always want them to win.
Judah Mintz is going to tear
I don't
up
care
the
if they
CPI.
lose.
Don't worry. He will.
Essentially, Owen is saying
NIT,
the future is
have a
bright.
good round 1.
The future is bright.
Bingo. I like what I see. Who cares if they win?
Speaking of bright futures, Fran Brown, Syracuse football. Owen,
# franchise.
You lived through in Syracuse the Dino Babers era. I will, before I turn over to you, I must give a shout out to your friend, my friend PJ Clark, who about a month ago, because I was at the game when Fran Brown gave his introductory press speech to the basketball crowd. And about a month ago, PJ, I could not thank him anymore for showing me, comparing that to Dino's speech to the basketball crowd. Maybe the greatest speech of all time. I've probably watched it about a dozen times in the past month. I'm sure you know it well. So I guess, that's just one way of comparing the differences between these two men leading this football program. From what you've seen in terms of football, I know, we are pretty much aligned that Dino Babers should not have been the coach of this football team anymore.
I would argue ever.
Sorry. It's hard to disagree on that. Hard to disagree. What of your first takes? I guess it's been almost a month now of Fran Brown, Ben, and Dino's demise in November and October.
Okay, my first take is confusion in that what does Fran Brown know about Syracuse that he has pulled with transfers and recruits that the last 2 decades of coaches have not known about Syracuse, right? What is he doing that makes him so good, and that is mind-boggling, right? He's the number one recruiter in the country. He is the greatest that you could have in terms of recruiting, but it's still Syracuse. And I can say that because I've been here 25 years. It is still Syracuse. People don't want to play football in Syracuse. And somehow, in 1 month, Fran Brown has said, yeah, but those people didn't know me.
But
And
what if
now
they?
he's
But
got
what if
some
they did? Yeah,
ballers.
but what if they did?
I don't know. Maybe they're 4-time national champions. Who knows? I'm going to say I love everything I've seen from Fran Brown. I like his speeches. I like his conversations. I like that when you ask him a question, he answers it and doesn't tell you about the movie that he watched last night. I think that's a cool attribute of a head coach. I like that it's very likely that the media might be able to speak to somebody in the Syracuse coaching administration outside of the head coach. I think that's a cool asset of a coach. I like that we're no longer censoring a program. I'll say that because that is what the Dino Babers era was. And we now have this open line of like kind of cool communication where you're hearing from some people and talking to some people, and things look good. We've got a quarterback that other people wanted. How about that? We've got some players that other people wanted. How about that? I will say this. I don't know if anybody on the staff knows how to coach football, but geez, can they recruit? And that is all I care about until they play that first football game is, boy, can they recruit.
I will hope that they could coach football, considering Fran Brown came from the SEC. Elijah Robinson just finished up with Texas A&M yesterday from the SEC. But you never know. One thing that I do go back to the recruiting aspect of it is the relationships that he kind of harps on. It's about him and the player. It's not about where it is. It's about him recruiting the player, knowing the family, which is a cool kind of thing to kind of realize that is why all these players are coming here. It's not necessarily because of Syracuse. It's because of Fran Brown. Yeah, it'll be an interesting. I think also a selling point now, I think we don't realize it as much, is with the anticipated offensive coordinator, because technically not confirmed yet, the pro style system. It's going to get players that play in it ready for the NFL. Playing a 4-3 instead of a 3-3-5 translates better to the NFL. So
No, everyone plays a 3-3-5.
Playing a more pro style system on both sides makes it easier, I think, for players to come to Syracuse because they can take those skills easier to the NFL. That I think also goes into the recruiting aspect of it.
Yes, the feared Ravens 3-3-5 defense right now, wrecking stuff in the NFL. I will give you a dipstick in terms of what this Fran Brown couple weeks, month almost now has been. I grew up as a Northwestern fan. They never recruited well. No one cares about Northwestern. I come to Syracuse. I get involved in Syracuse, and I see what the recruiting is like in Syracuse. Not a whole lot. Over these last few weeks, I have become so spoiled. There's a 24/7 recruiting tab open on my computer 24/7. Like, it is always there. I have become so spoiled that when a recruit commits to somewhere else that's not Syracuse, when Syracuse is in the mix, I go, wait, what? Wait, they're not what? Like, how is this possible? It's not computing with me. That is how good Fran Brown has been at recruiting, that I don't understand when a recruit doesn't commit to Syracuse with what they're building. It has been unreal what he's done in the last few weeks, piling up players. I mean, the transfers coming in from Georgia are the most exciting part. Not just Kyle McCord. Fadil Diggs is very exciting, but a guy like Zeed Haynes that's going to revolutionize this offense with his speed. So many of these different pieces that he's building, and it's only going to build for the next year because a lot of these guys, McCord doesn't have extra eligibility, but you can hit the portal again and get a new quarterback. I'm looking past next year. I'm looking to the year after and the year after, and what are they going to be consistently? And that's something that I've never done I'm a Bears fan too. I've never done with any football team ever. I have never had that with a football team, and Fran Brown has done that for me in the last 3.5 weeks. So it's very exciting in that perspective, at least from recruiting.
Yeah, and I mean, I like how, and boy, I'm not as versed on recruiting as I was 3 months ago, but barring some tragic change that I missed, is Jakari Williams still committed to
Yes,
Syracuse?
he signed.
He
Yeah,
signed.
he signed. He signed.
How much smoother is this transition now with a year of let's watch some really good quarterbacking, and then you can go to a guy that at one point was like, I think Rivals had him as like a top 50 player in the country or something nutty. They had him overranked and everyone didn't, but he's had the Syracuse effect since happened to him. You'll notice that committing to Syracuse is where 4-star players go to become 3-star players. It's just the natural 24/7 can't accept the fact that Syracuse got a good recruit, but
He's
maybe
the
that
sixth.
changes
He's
now.
the sixth highest recruit or sixth highest signee on the composite for Syracuse right now.
Which is nuts. Because
he's 600. According to the composite, he's 3 stars, 644th overall nationally.
Yeah, let's also realize too that a lot of these guys, I mean, Jakari Williams was committed to Dino Babers initially, so give Dino a little bit of credit for that, especially also he had Jamie Tremble. But a lot of these guys are flipping to Fran Brown. Imagine what he can do in a year's worth of recruiting. This is just
Syracuse,
2 weeks.
The only high school prospect who I'm seeing linked to is Marcellus Barnes from Tennessee, who would, if he committed, would become the new second highest recruit, according to the composite for this class behind Emmanuel Ross.
I was looking at a Tim Leonard tweet today, actually, was outlining the defense now that Marlo Wax is back, and pretty much all the positions. I mean, the defensive line a little bit, suspect in terms. There's a lot of names there.
Cornerback.
Yes, I was gonna get there. There's a lot of names there, but a little bit suspect. But cornerback, the 4 cornerbacks on the roster right now are Jaden Bellamy, Quan Peterson, Greg Delane, and Jaleel Martin. So getting a 4-star cornerback, even though starting a freshman isn't necessarily the most positive thing to do, cornerback, Coach Fran Brown coached the DBs at Georgia. That's the real position of absolute need on that defense currently.
DBU.
Yeah, and the portal's not closed yet. There's still a lot of guys. I don't know if you saw Deion Sanders tweet the other day. Yeah, DBU. There you go. I don't know if you saw Deion Sanders tweet the other day, but he essentially just went out and said, "Oh, there's still guys in the portal. Let me get these guys." And Fran Brown responded to that with a tweet that I'm seeing now that Deion retweeted. Deion said, "Dang, I see the portal doing the bank head bounce." Anyway, he went off and said, "Santa, please drop off another DT, corner, linebacker, and pass rusher to Boulder." Fran Brown responded with, "Tell them don't forget about cousin Fran Brown. We need them trenches." I mean, he is still recruiting. He is still out there. All of these Christmas presents that we got, there's more coming. There could be more on the way. I'm not going to say there is more coming, but there could be more on the way. And there's a lot of offers that are going out. A couple of JUCO guys just got offered that are really good D tackles. One guy that's massive and runs a 4.6, and he's like 300 something pounds at 6'5", and he runs a 4.6. Like really athletic, good guys that can build around. They need more on that interior defensive line. They need more on the corners, and they need more on the offensive line. But everything else has been built out in a way, especially now with the return of Aronde Gadsden, which we haven't talked about yet, the return of Marlo Wax, the return of Justin Barron. It's a really good look for this team so far.
I just to take a step out and go macro. People are talking about Syracuse football during basketball season, which doesn't happen for positive reasons, right? Like that's not something that happens. And Syracuse basketball is almost, because of how incredible this start has been, is almost taking a back seat some days in season to Syracuse football, which is unheard of. And that just goes to show that, even if the impact isn't immediate, right? You got to still have realistic expectations, right? But this is a team that can go into a mediocre ACC right now and win some football games. But they're talking right now. And it's energy for Syracuse football and excitement for Syracuse football. And I didn't have that, nor did I see it with Syracuse football under Dino Babers. And so to see that for the first time in however many years, there's some excitement, there's some energy. I go back. You were talking about speeches. Oh, that Dino Babers was at the first press conference.
Feel me.
Close your eyes and visualize this. We'll have a special teams that is well coached. Penalties. We don't know how to punt. We don't know how to kick. We don't know how to get the kicking unit on the field. We don't know how to determine whether or not we're going to use the special teams. The special teams was not well coached, but we got energy right now. We have excitement for Syracuse football. And it is because, and I saw the same thing with basketball during the coaching change. I don't know if maybe I just missed it in the past, but like the recruiting efforts are more public. And like I'm seeing what they're doing more. And I think mentally, like that means a lot, like to see the efforts. And I don't know, maybe Dino was just a silent assassin. He liked to keep everything lock and key. I talked about that already. Like maybe that's just sort of the way he went about it. But like as a fan, as someone looking, it's cool to see like, hey, they're going here this week. They're doing this week. This is what we're doing for recruits now. And other recruits see that, same as fans. And you're like, ooh, like that's a pretty cool thing what Syracuse is doing recruiting wise. Maybe I join that conversation, right? We are in an era where like social media aspect of it, like the visual aspect of it. I go to the Hoop mixtape, right? And the evolution of the Hoop mixtape and like how big a deal that is, right? People want to see things that are going on. They want to see cool things you're doing. They want to share cool things you're doing. And finally, in basketball and football, it seems like we're sharing those cool things that are happening a lot more. And I think that is like another little underlying thing that continues to trickle into more recruits and more conversations.
Yeah. And I mean, the future is so bright. Uh, it, it's kind of like, it kind of goes, I
It's
kind of go
weird.
back to what you were saying. Yeah, it's weird. Like, kind of go back to what you were saying at the beginning. Like, it doesn't even make any sense, like what is happening, and yet it is. But then I just keep coming back to, can they coach? Like, can they manage a game? Things of that nature. Can they call plays? I'm sure they can develop and teach technique, but like actual in-game coaching, and we have to wait 8 months for that. And I'm also very interested to see what they do for the 12th game on this schedule, because we know the Army game has been canceled because of they joined the American Athletic Conference, and talks with Kansas for a potential game in the Dome have backed off. So, Jordan, I'm sure you'll be the most interested to see what that 12th game will potentially be. But
Yeah,
we will see.
there's a bunch of teams that kind of need a 12th game because partly because Army canceled 3/4 of their games because now they're in conference. The one that we've been talking about is the potential of Notre Dame just moving up the 2025 game because they're also in need of a game as well, and their game against Army, it's supposed to be at Yankee Stadium, got canceled. Now, if Syracuse played a third straight year at Yankee Stadium, that would be a little bit crazy,
That's a trigger word for me.
Yeah, please no.
Jordan, if that happens, I would cry. If they move up the Notre Dame game, I think I would cry.
Well, they
Hudson,
could move it
you
up.
guys
They
have
could.
enough good.
Yeah,
you guys have
relax,
enough
Hudson.
games.
Your road schedule is the best road schedule ever created in college football.
That
So,
was
they might move up. The theory is they might move up the Notre Dame game to be at Notre Dame in 2020 next year, and then in 2025 be at Yankee or somewhere or something like that. But who knows?
Ugh. All right. Well, we've gone over an hour plus here. It's been a quite long episode of the podcast. Any final thoughts from the guys on anything before we sign off? Actually, no. Before final thoughts, we asked this to Johnny and Ben and Owen. Got to talk about, asked about favorite pod moments, favorite AR or podcast moments. Johnny highlighted talking to lacrosse coaches. Johnny's got a thing for lacrosse. I don't know. Ben said, some of those interviews, like in the Sweet 16 run back in 2021, when the pod was kind of popping off, were some of the things he highlighted. Is there anything that you'd go back to as some of your favorite moments from the pod, or just your WAER career as a whole?
Oh God, I love WAER. Lead with that. It's a really just it is as cool of a place and environment as you could possibly have. And like, it's hard to explain like what it is to other people because it doesn't make sense. It's like, you used to wake up at 5 and do this and that and this. And then like, if you woke up at 5 enough times, then you got to like do the grunt work, which was even cooler than waking up at 5. And everyone's just like, well, what's the point of this? And it's like, this right here is the point of it. My highlight, I think, right now, as I look back, is just the fact that like this show is still up and running. Like, it is really cool. The show, I don't know if you've ever looked back at the first episode of the Ostrom Avenue podcast, but the show was supposed to be like a really deep dive on one really niche attribute of what was going on. And so our first episode was like, what were the best I think it was the best defensive line duos in the history of Syracuse football. And that lasted one episode. And then it just became game previews and game recaps and more general conversations. But like, I don't know. Brendan Mortensen came to me with an idea. We did it. I love that. Good parts. There were a lot. Some things that probably can't be discussed. There were some disaster moments that like I look back on now and they are so funny. But we'll hold off on those. It just like, I look back at the community. I look back at a talk department that when myself and Max Chadwick came in, definitely was lacking in many regards. And now I look and, it's pretty cool, the growth and things like that have happened. So just, it's a very mundane and boring answer, I guess, but like just the little things, like the growth that continues to happen, to look back on is pretty cool. And I'm sure the second I finish talking, the really good memory will hit me, but it's not there yet, and that'll be okay.
No, I think you said what matters, and it's like the community, and that, what the bonds that you form are very special, and you cherish those for a long time. And even if there isn't something specific, it's the whole experience that kind of meshes into one. And like, you don't even remember like that specific of moments. Oh yes, go ahead. Now here, see, just as you predicted.
Okay. I feel like the statute of limitations on this has expired. When I went to school, the world didn't exist in a normalcy. And there was a football season that was played with no fans. And one of the locations that accepted some fans was Clemson. And 6 WAER associated friends took a road trip to South Carolina that was approved by some people, but not necessarily all of the people. And let's just say that the head of Syracuse athletics had our names on a list and was not very pleased with us for making this trip to South Carolina in the height of COVID and the repercussions of it. But we quarantined for 2 weeks afterwards. And you know who didn't? The football team that was there the same amount of time that we were. So I feel like we did our part in not spreading disease.
And you stayed safe, you stayed healthy. So good job on you guys. You did your part. And see,
now my sister goes there, so we go back.
Exactly. Owen, can't thank you enough for your time. This has been a complete joy, a nice trip down memory lane, I hope, and a lot of fun, having a nice solid discourse between the four of us.
I am beyond pleased to be back. Thank you. I don't know, maybe 4 more years. We'll do another reunion episode with
we'll do another
3 people that I definitely
maybe we'll just make it
a
holiday. Maybe we'll make it a holiday special next year. And when we have a lucky number 8, because Hudson and Jordan will have added someone after I'm gone, and we'll just have an octo box of Ostrom, the Ostrom family for the next year's holiday special.
Is it 7 people now? Is that what it is?
Well, we got the 4 of us: Ben, Johnny, Brendan. So that would be 7. Yeah, it's a lot of people. Make sure Owen referenced the YouTube channel. Make sure you're checking us out there. I mean, growth is exponential on the YouTube channel right now. We're over 50 subscribers. We'd love for you to join that number. A whopping 50 subscribers. Please join us. Make sure you follow us on social media as well at Ostrom Avenue Pod Basketball. It's here. ACC play full swing. Make sure you're checking out all of WAER's coverage, whether that be game broadcast, the double overtime sports night, whatever it may be. And of course, the Ostrom Avenue podcast brought to you by Empire Hearing and Audiology. We thank them very much for their continued support of the show and allowing us to get our alums of the show back on the program. They paid Owen a hefty sum to get him on the show today. And that's what matters here on the Ostrom Avenue podcast. So thank you so much for listening. Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you in January.